Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Football is back. Let's go, everybody. Happy freaking Thursday. And yes, it is indeed a great day to be great. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Fantastic show on the dock. We got, some news to discuss and then all sorts of start-sit questions, propaganda coming your way. And joining me today, not just Dwain the Rock McFarland, but also Matthew Freedman, a.k.a. Matt F. the Oracle. That's right. That little kid you saw in the league back in the day is actually now this grown man sitting with us today. So Freeman, welcome to the show.
Yeah, always great to join you guys and talk some football. And week one is finally here. And of course, we're going to talk about it. But week two, that's where it's really at.
What? You're just already dismissing week
We're already
one.
jumping
Dwayne,
into
what's
week
this guy's deal?
Look, it's Freedman, and it's why we love him, and we appreciate him for who he is. All of his flaws. He does also, guys, have redeeming qualities. You're going to see them later in the show. He just doesn't always lead off with them. It is a great day to be great, though, Hartitz. We do have football. It's in the air. I did a little math before the show just to check my Rashee Rice exposure across all of my fantasy football teams. I'm about $5,000 in. So what could go wrong? This could be a great night tonight. If Rashee Rice goes off, for 7 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown, we'll be really happy. If the injury gods somehow were to strike, I may not be on the show tomorrow. So I love putting all my eggs in a basket like this. It's really, really sharp on my part.
Rashee Rice sent out a cool looking tweet of himself saying calm before, the storm. And then Hollywood Brown said your performance will feed families tomorrow, brother. And those families is specifically the McFarland household. So great stuff here. We're excited for week one. Freeman's excited for week two. And guess what? We are all excited about the options that Fantasy Life Plus presents. What a freaking segue from your boy. But yeah, guys, Fantasy Life Plus, our premium product over here at Fantasy Life. You got your draft, you got your teams. But now, if you're anything like me, you have way too many of them to manage, and you could use just a little bit of help. And that's where Fantasy Life Plus comes into play. Our start sit tool, waiver wire fab recommendations, consensus rankings, projections, Dwayne's utilization tool suite, all that and so much more. Again, not trying to break your bank account. Tier 1 package under $40 per year, and Tier 2 is far less than a Chipotle burrito per month, which again, I maintain. Lower your freaking prices, guys, because I got to find a new metaphor for that one. So Fantasy Life Plus, check it out. Time for some news, gentlemen. Namely, yes, that's right, the consensus, number 3 wide receiver for most of the offseason, Jamar Chase, finally returned to practice. Now, things aren't exactly done yet. Officially listed as limited. Fantastic tweet by Underdog NFL saying that the reason was bag chasing. And yes, we also heard from Ian Rapoport that they have not, reached a final conclusion. But he's back at practice, which presumably is a good sign for him getting out there in week one. So, Dwayne, are we pretty confident now that Chase is going to be out there come Sunday?
I don't know. It was a limited practice. They're still saying they don't know. I have no clue what to think about it. I'm preparing as though Jamar Chase is going to be out there. I'm going to have him in my lineups, but I also have contingency plans in place. I do have quite a few Jamar Chase shares as well because I'm a bit of a gambler. When he's falling to the end of round 1, I was like, fine, I'm just going to take Jamar Chase. If he misses 2 games, I'll live with it. I would love to see a deal get done today. I know I saw, earlier today, hey, 1 year ago today, Joe Burrow got the new biggest quarterback contract. Maybe they're about to do the same with Jamar Chase today. I know that's all just speculation, but yeah, it would be good news just to have him signed, Hartitz.
Freeman Rapshi said the Bengals have made significant offers and quote unquote somewhat in the neighborhood of what he wants. Wouldn't describe this as close, but it's at least close enough to practice. Yeah, that helps a lot here. Freeman, how confident are you that we do see Jamar Chase out there in week 1 against the Patriots?
I have no confidence in anything except for the fact that I bet under 5.5 receptions for Rashee Rice for week 1. Sorry about that. Dwayne. Really sorry. But I will say, if you look at the betting market is positioning itself as if Jamar Chase is unlikely to play. This line was Bengals favored by 9 a couple of weeks ago. It dropped down to 7.5. It has ticked back up to 8, as if maybe it's likelier now than it was a week ago that Jamar Chase plays, but it is still not baked in as if it is a certainty that Jamar Chase plays the way that it was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups where I'm pretty sure I ranked it dead last in my entertainment rankings in week one. Again, I'm never going to be the guy that says, oh, look at this horrible football game on TV, because a bad football game is better than no football out there. But yeah, guys, game total 41 lowly points, tied for the second lowest mark in all of week one. The other big news that shook the fantasy football world to its core. That's right. Kyle Pitts is already injured. His hamstring hurts, guys. And yeah, it doesn't seem like the biggest of deals. Head coach Raheem Morris did say that it's been a thing that happened a couple of weeks ago, and quote unquote, it hasn't really affected him too much. Also said that there is no concern for him. That said, Dwain, we don't like seeing players that we use a fairly high draft pick in on the injury report already with a hamstring issue. Are you adjusting any ranks after getting this news?
Well, the problem with it is like you kind of hit that tier break. I guess if you wanted to slip him below Evan Ingram, like that would be fine. Like if you're kind of coming to a tiebreaker sort of situation, I still think Kyle Pitts' ceiling is higher than Evan Ingram, but the floor is definitely higher for, Evan Ingram. Like Pitts has the ceiling. Ingram's going to give you the floor. Obviously we talked about his splits yesterday with and without Christian Kirk. We know that when Kirk's out of the lineup, Ingram really shines, but he's still a good player. Like you can start him every week as your starting tight end. He'll be a mid-range tight end one. So I'm not adjusting it, but if folks are just a little bit leery, I am with you, Hartitz. Like ideally you don't want to be taking players with any sort of injury at this point in the year. Hamstrings can be a bit tricky, but overall the news isn't terrible. Like, okay, limited sounds like something they've probably already been working him back from for 2 weeks. If I heard he pulled his hamstring yesterday in practice and went from full to limited, I'd be a lot more worried about Kyle Pitts in week one.
Pitts himself does not seem overly concerned, went to Twitter to say, dang, 2 less plays in a rack got y'all concerned. I'll see you all on Sunday. So Freedman certainly sounds like he will be out there. But if I had to list Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, and Taysom Hill, we'll say kill, start, and go on a date with, how would you kind of deal with that one, Freedman?
I mean, if we're thinking of week one versus the season, I'm going to say this is week one. I mean, Kyle Pitts, when we're drafting him, he was the tight end 5, tight end 6. Now I'm looking at our rankings at FantasyLife. We have him as the tight end 8. Like he's dropped down a couple of spots, and some of this could just be the matchup, but some of it is also like, hey, the hamstring issue for a guy who has had injury problems the last 2 years. Maybe we need to be just a little bit more cautious about this than we ordinarily would be.
Freedman just said, I am not going anywhere near that question. So I respect it. Taysom Hill is the lowest one in the ranks. Pitts still the highest, but I am with Dwain. Ahead of that Dolphins-Jaguars potential shootout, would not blame anyone if they do want to just take the guy who, again, isn't actively dealing with a hamstring problem. And finally, guys, you all may have heard, yeah, football's back. We got Chiefs and the Ravens going down in Arrowhead. Again, rematch of the AFC Championship. Chiefs have held steady as 3-point favorites. Game total resting at a pretty high 47 points over there. So, Freeman, what are you most excited about on this Thursday night? Betting unders, kicker props, what we got?
Oh, man. The under does intrigue, as you guys almost certainly know, but the Ravens as underdogs, Lamar Jackson as an underdog, 12-2 against the spread for his career, 9-5 on the money line as an underdog for his career with a smoking hot 61% return on investment. I'm curious to see if we end up seeing Lamar Jackson actually get some revenge, hashtag revenge for what happened in the AFC Championship game. But just excited to see some football, and also excited to see if that Chiefs offense is able to rebound. Like, it's not going to be the number 15 offense in scoring, but is it going to be the number 1 offense the way it was the year prior? So just curious to see how lethal that Chiefs offense actually is in week one.
Only, fantasy starter of note to note that is out. Hollywood Brown with that shoulder injury as expected. So Dwain, Rashee Rice starting a fantasy football lineups of all shapes and sizes. Anything else that you want to point out for this, again, electric Thursday night kickoff matchup?
No, I'm just super excited that it's back, but super excited to see Derrick Henry in the Ravens offense. The last time, again, we saw this matchup, it was a pass-heavy approach from the Ravens. I think we heard Harbaugh after the game essentially say, yeah, never again would they do. They go out and they sign Derrick Henry. I'm not saying a running back is going to change a team's whole fortunes, but he is going to be more valuable to the Ravens than he would be to many other teams because of the combo of Lamar and Derrick Henry. And that's how you attack the Chiefs. So I think we're going to see a lot more rushing from the Ravens tonight and then trying to hit the big plays in the passing game.
I'm curious to see if Justin Tucker decides to be a bit of a dickhead again and warm up in front of the entire Chiefs offense as they're trying to get ready. Fun fact, everyone, Justin Tucker has made 2 of his last 6 field goals over 50 yards, 11 of his last 20. Is he a fraud? Is he washed? Things that maybe people should be asking a little bit more often. And that is the last time I'll be talking about kickers for the rest of week 1 and maybe eternity. So good stuff there, gentlemen. Now I'll just have a few, rapid fire news tidbits to get to you guys before we get on with the rest of our show, because we have practice reports rolling in hot and heavy, a lot of good injury information out there. So practicing in full, Puka Nacua, Curtis Samuel, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Tyrone Tracy, when we're seeing them start the week with a full practice. Yes, we do fully expect them to suit up come this weekend. Limited in practice, got to keep a bit more of an eye on them. DeAndre Hopkins with that knee injury, Keenan Allen's dealing with a heel, Tyler Lockett with a thigh, Noah Fant with a toe, and Miles Sanders with a finger. So we'll see if they can get up to a full practice. And don't worry, Dwain and I will be back on every Friday to go through all of the pertinent fantasy football injuries to know about as well. Also limited was Jordan Addison with an ankle. However, head coach Kevin O'Connell did say that he hopes to progress him to full by the end of the week, and he feels pretty good about him playing. Particularly important with number 3 Vikings wide receiver Jalen Naylor, also limited with an ankle issue. Antonio Pierce did confirm that Brock Bowers will play in week 1 despite having that foot injury. Love to see that. And yeah, other guys that were not listed on the injury report at all, aka they are playing: Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, Jacoby Brissett, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. So love to see that. Todd Bowles talking about his running back room, says it's going to be a game-by-game basis, and we'll go with the hot hand. Maybe not quite the same sort of workhorse Rachaad White show that we're used to. Yes, that is Bucky Irving's music you are hearing. Also, 3 good notes from The Athletic. We had Zach Rosenblatt saying that Mike Williams is going to play a limited role to start the season, aka Dwayne's favorite wide receiver, Allen Lazard, getting a fair share of reps early on. Chiefs reporter Nate Taylor says Samaje Perine's role will be the one Jerick McKinnon had the last 2 seasons. Just realize, guys, that role had 5 carries and 2.7 targets per game last year. So pretty sure Pacheco's still going to get fed plenty of touches and an offense that, again, we expect to score plenty of points. And finally, per The Athletic's Paul Denner, Cincinnati will not put Jermaine Burton out there or even make him active on game day until they feel comfortable that he is preparing for meetings, will be in the right spots, and can be trusted by the QB. They said that sounds far. Paul said it's more likely to be a redshirt year than anything else. So as Dwayne so eloquently treated, Jermaine Burton really got that dog house in him going on. So great stuff there, everyone. That's the news. And before we keep on going, time to pay a little bit of homage. Calling all fantasy football fanatics, the season is finally here. Draft rankings are being overanalyzed, keeper decisions are being made, and sleepers are being shortlisted. But how about your fantasy football fit? I know I'm feeling great about my Homage shirt. Straight cash, homie. Randy Moss. It's comfortable. It makes me seem cooler than I actually am in real life. And that's what Homage is really here to do at the end of the day. Homage is super soft, ultra comfortable. NFL player apparel is a first-round pick that is sure to make your fellow managers jealous and allow you to glow in style all season long. From past stat stuffing legends to the current crop of fantasy studs helping you to secure this year's championship, they've got everything you need to gear up for the new season. Check out homage.com. That's HOMAGE.com/fantasy to reveal their top-ranked officially licensed player tees so you can rep your fantasy team with pride. Be sure to use promo code LIFE for an exclusive discount for Fantasy Life listeners. Pay homage. Dwayne, you got your lovely, critically acclaimed rankings up on FantasyLife.com. And one of the things you're doing this year is kind of going through the positions and giving a smash, a fade, and a sicko start, which is a nice way of saying, like, no, this guy isn't ranked too highly. But it's one of those you can imagine if he actually does go out there, because there's a few things you like about it. So without further ado, let's get into your quarterbacks. You're smashing CJ Stroud, you're fading Dak Prescott, and your sicko start, Sam Darnold. Elaborate a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, for Stroud, look, you drafted him, you're starting him, but it's still fun to kind of go back and look at like how good CJ Stroud actually is. So if you look at his 274 passing yards per game and 1.5 touchdowns per game last year, Ian, and then we go back and we look at history all the way back to 2011, and we look at the quarterbacks that have thrown for over 270 yards per game in their first season. Most of these are rookies. 2 of them are rookies. Justin Herbert, 289. Andrew Luck, 273. I said first season for a reason, because Patrick Mahomes didn't get to start until his second season. He averaged 319 passing yards per game, but not a bad club to be in. Now we add Stephon Diggs to the mix. You get Tank Dell back from injury. We already know Nico Collins got the big contract this offseason, an absolutely loaded offense. And then we also obviously have a great game environment here. Okay. If you have a good passing attack, you're probably going to have a high team total, which they do, 26.25 points. That's the third highest team total on the slate this weekend. So we're expecting a lot of points here, and it's a competitive game, right? We're talking about a game where it's only a 3-point difference between the two teams against the Colts. And then if we look at the Colts defense, they didn't really make that many changes in their secondary this season, and 252 yards allowed per game last year. So it's a big matchup as well. So anytime you click all three of those boxes, you're going to be a smash play. And then if you look at Dak Prescott, it's the opposite. Prescott, yes, we know he's a good player. We know he's passed for a lot of yards. All those things are there. Prescott's still fine for the season. But in week one, he's got to play a Browns defense, Ian, that's returning most of their starters. They allowed only 191 passing yards per game last year. That was the third fewest. And then if you look at defense versus position, which is a great tool we have over at FantasyLife, guys, you can go check it out and you can see how each defense has performed fantasy points wise against all the different positions. Only 15 fantasy points per game allowed last season. That's the fourth fewest. And the Cowboys, who typically have a really good team total, this is showing up because there is respect for the Browns defense in Vegas. 19.75 projected points for this game. That is the fifth lowest on the slate. That's a really low number for the Cowboys, guys. So a lot of respect here to the Browns, who have Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. They're going to be bringing the pressure. Cowboys are going to have to operate without Tyron Smith. Now, they did add a first-round tackle, and Tyron has missed time. But yes, I do have Dak as a downgrade. Ian, I would start Tua. I would start Goff. I would start Caleb Williams. I would start Matthew Stafford. I would start all of those quarterbacks over Dak this weekend. And then you mentioned it, the sicko start. I'm not saying you guys have to go out and do this, but if you're in a sicko league, like you're in a sicko league, there's no one on the waiver wire. You guys are flexing like 3 players. You might have a super flex, which is an extra quarterback. If you're in a sicko league. And if you are, my name for you this weekend is Sam Darnold. If you look at our projection model, he came in as the QB 17, which was ahead of Dak Prescott. That was ahead of Kirk Cousins. Yeah, he's only averaged 211 yards per game in healthy games for his career. So when you see his 245 projected yards in our model, you're probably thinking that's a little bit unhinged. And I thought it too when I first looked at it. But then I looked at the matchup. They're playing against the Giants. I don't know if you guys can even name the starting cornerbacks for the Giants, but we've got Deonte Banks, who ranked 110 out of 126 qualifiers over at PFF in coverage grade last year. Adoree Jackson was 117 out of 126. And then they have a third-round nickelback in Andrew Phillips. Yeah, hopefully Andrew Phillips is going to be a great player in the NFL, but those are 3 cornerbacks that no matter where Justin Jefferson lines up, he's going to be eating. And oh, by the way, the Giants were one of the most, I don't know why, they were one of the most man-heavy coverage units last year. Now, they are changing their defensive coordinator. So I do expect some changes there. So I think we're going to see some more zone. But still, Justin Jefferson has a chance to smash in week 1. And when you get that, that means that Sam Darnold also has a chance to pay off in week 1.
We've talked a little bit about how, taking Jefferson's 4-game split at the end of last year is a little bit, screwy because, again, they did get that 2 layup matchups against the man-heavy Detroit Lions secondary. And, yeah, suddenly looks like he's going to get another nice little layup here in week 1. So, yes, obviously you're starting Justin Jefferson in lineups of every shape and size. But if Addison's out there, maybe a nice little dark horse spot for him. And to Dwayne's point, a sicko start there for Sam Darnold. Freeman, looking at this Cowboys-Browns game, it is one of the few matchups where we have at least a little bit of weather concern. Kevin Roth does fantastic work over at Roto Grinders, and he is giving it a yellow rating, which again isn't full on red, but is, as we know, how traffic lights work past green. Sustained winds around 10 to 15 miles per hour with gusts reaching 20 miles per hour. So other than CeeDee Lamb, Freedman, is there really anyone you're starting with confidence in this Browns-Cowboys matchup?
Not really. I mean, if you're in a sort of sicko situation, maybe you hope Zeke falls into the end zone and you start him that way. But to totally echo everything Dwain said about Dak Prescott here, I mean, we know his splits. He's great at home, not as good on the road. And then he's not just on the road, he's outdoors in the road in what could possibly be bad weather, going against a defense that last year had significant splits where it was just a killer unit at home, not as good on the road. So just an absolute terrible matchup here for the Cowboys. Definitely agree with Dwayne. And then, to CJ Stroud, yeah, smash. He's got the best 3 wide receivers in the league in terms of a trio. And then Sam Darnold, I thought about including him in Freedman's favorites. I didn't know if I wanted to be that sicko, that degenerate, but totally agree with Dwain. You think Sam Darnold, maybe he's kind of like bottom tier, like number 30, 32 in terms of starting quarterbacks in the league. This week, he's probably on that QB2, QB3 borderline, to where in super flex leagues, he's definitely in consideration.
Dwain's projections for the Houston Texans wide receivers, which you can find on FantasyLife.com, have Nico Collins leading the way. Stephon Diggs getting the second most targets and yards, though. And then, yes, in third, Tank Dell. So I do not think Freedman is out of line. This does look like the single best wide receiver trio in the NFL, with all due respect to what the Bears and some other squads are cooking with at the moment. So, again, everyone's starting CJ Stroud as a top 8 consensus ranked quarterback in our ranks for a reason. Dak Prescott, maybe get him a little bit of a seat on the bench. I appreciate him going to Yahoo Sports and telling fantasy managers, don't put me in the super flex, put me in that QB1 spot. Sorry, Dak, not this week. And then also, again, the sicko start, Sam Darnold against the Giants defense that, we are not overly respecting out here. So good stuff there, Mr. McFarland. Now let's get to your, again, smash, fade, and sicko start running back. Starting off with a smash, Mr. Joe Mixon, someone that, people usually were able to draft in the 3rd, 4th, maybe even a little bit later rounds of their fantasy drafts. And all of a sudden, Dwayne, we get the week 1 projections, and he's a workhorse inside an offense. We expect to score a hell of a lot of points.
Yeah, it's funny how season-long rankings work, and then when you get to week 1, and it's always a great question that you ask me, even when we're drafting together sometimes, Hartitz, you're like, but where are you going to rank him in week 1? And at some point in your draft, that really does matter, like, because you got to think about it. There's a reason Joe Mixon went later in fantasy drafts. In your home leagues, he was going around 3, 4, and high stakes, more expert type of drafts where the sickos are playing. He's going around 5, but the reason for that is because he is going to season, which can be a cliff year for running backs. We've already seen the drop off from an efficiency standpoint. Ian, his PFF rush grade was 73.8. That was 26 out of 37 qualifying running backs last year. Missed tackles forced ranked 35th out of 37. Average yards after contact. You think of Joe Mixon as being this really tough downhill runner who can add value in that area. He ranked 35th out of 37 backs there as well. So those things are definitely issues. But here's the thing. That's already been going on with Mixon for 2 seasons now. And guess what? Coaches still trust him. They still want to give him the ball, which is this thing that doesn't fit into our fantasy football spreadsheets. And we've heard all of the praises all offseason long from Bobby Slowick. So in week 1, I just don't worry about all that. Could those underpinnings ultimately doom Joe Mixon at some point this season? And they decide, maybe we need to give carries to another back. Like, anything like that is possible. But in week 1, that's not happening. And you just mentioned it. We've got a game that's we're expected to see a ton of points. We're going to have a guy getting plenty of carries inside the 5-yard line. So yes, whenever you look at him, you just project out his volume for week 1, Ian, it's super hard to not find a way to have this guy at least in your running back 2 spot. He projects for the 7th most points of all flex players. That's looking at all wide receivers and all running backs in our Fantasy Life projection model for the weekend. That makes him a smash play. I have him as my number 12 player overall, looking at all running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends together.
Dwayne and I both have Mixon as our RB7 in terms of positional ranks. Freedman, RB16. So if you have anything mean you want to say about Dwayne's ranking or just him personally, man, the floor is yours.
No, I mean, I have lots of mean things I would love to say about Dwain, but we'll save that for off the air. But in terms of Mixon, I will just say I'm too low on him, and when I was writing up Freedman's favorites, I was looking, I was like, I got to include him. And so when I update my rankings, literally right after we record this show, I have him as my RB16 now. I think he's going to be closer to RB12 after I do the updates.
Okay, I was hoping to get some jabs flying. Stern but fair. Yeah, everyone, you should be starting Joe Mixon in fantasy lineups this week. Who you should not be starting, Dwayne, is potentially Zamir White going up against the Chargers defense that, we saw the Raiders drop, 63 points on last year. Got some help, on the DST side of things as well. But, man, Dwayne, if we can't start Zamir White against the Chargers, who really can we feel good about him against? And, maybe the answer is nobody.
Yeah, look, I just don't see the reason to risk it with Zamir White in week 1 because we got this weird utilization thing at the end of the preseason over those 2 games with the starters in the game. They were really rotating him and Alexander Mattison a lot more than what I think fantasy, folks expected. They both also stayed in the game after the starters left. So it's almost like the coaching staff was like looking for, hey, when do you guys take this job? And I don't think either one of them did. So I think we could see a situation where we come out in week 1, man, and what if it's 40% to each of these guys and an offense that we don't really like? I think the Chargers defense is going to be way better than what people think, especially against the run. Look, guys, as much as Harbaugh likes to establish the run for his offense, he likes to pile the box and stop it on his side of the ball. So they're not going to let the Raiders run the football. The best way to attack the Chargers last year was already through the air. They've obviously made some improvements to their secondary, but I also see the Raiders, and I'm like, you've got Brock Bowers, you've got Devontae Adams, you've got Jacoby Myers. I get it, you got Gardner Minshew, but the better way to attack the Chargers still might be through the air. I just think there's a lot of unknowns here, and I don't see a reason to try to force this in week 1, Ian, for a team that's got 18.75, expected points right now, as far as their team total, if we're looking at the Vegas lines. Like, I don't know that either one of these running backs is going to have a chance to score a touchdown. Right. So I just don't see a reason to force it with Zamir White this week.
Had a nice stretch run at the end of last year, but I think people almost remember it being bigger than it actually was in their minds. I mean, over the last 4 games in terms of just PPR points, RB 12, 16, 16, and then 20th, because guess what? It's hard to really rack up these monster finishes in full PPR scoring when, you aren't catching too many passes out there. Freedman, is there really anyone in this Raiders offense that interests you? Because again, we love Adams' talent. Jacoby Myers, dog. Brock Bowers, dog. Even Zamir White, okay, he should be getting 15 plus carries out there. So can we trust anyone? Because as much as Harbaugh and companies should be improving that Chargers defense, not the most formidable, that's a tough word, opponent on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in Adams, and we'll talk about him a little bit. I will give a little bit of resistance to the Zamir White fade. I agree with Dwayne's point that there's uncertainty here. That is certainly the case. And if at the end of week 1, we're like, oh man, Alexander Mattison ended up taking like 48% of the snaps, we are not going to feel good about Zamir White. But I still think based on what he did last year, he is the front runner entering this year. I think he's going to get maybe 60, 75 up in that range. It's a wide range, but percent of the carries in that offense. And I think this is going to be an offense, even when they're losing, they're going to be running the ball way more than they should. So I still think that makes Zamir White a high end RB3, but one with a really wide range of outcomes where if the floor just fell out, that would not be a surprise at all.
Friedman. So here's where I was at on this. So my thought would be, if I have to pick, though, on an uncertain backfield, would I rather take a dip? Would I rather dip my toes in the waters of the Zach Moss, Chase Brown, an actual good offense favored largely in a game against the Patriots this weekend where they could just be running the ball by the second half? You got Chuba Hubbard, similar situation, but probably more of a lock to get carries, in my opinion, over Miles Sanders, who's now dealing with a finger injury. We've got Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, both better players than Zamir White. And so ultimately, that's how Zamir White got pushed way down my ranks. It's just as I got to any other situation where I thought there could be a split backfield, which I think Zamir White's in that category now. I agree that he is the favorite to lead the backfield, but I think he's more in a bucket with those players now where we really could see that ambiguity on a week-to-week basis. So I just lean into the better offenses. I would start Brian Robinson Jr. over him as well, because I like the idea of Jaden Daniels paired with Brian Robinson Jr., and I think there's more touchdown upside for the Commanders this weekend. So I do agree with what you're saying. I just kind of got into this game where I was like, well, it's kind of the game we're going to play later, right? Where we're going to marry somebody, we're going to cut somebody, we're going to bench somebody. So I just kept moving Zamir White down, and that's how he landed where he's at.
Yeah, all of those guys you mentioned, I have Zamir White ranked ahead of all of them. And the thing is, I don't really disagree with what you're saying. They are all in these uncertain situations. It's just we've seen Zamir White do it at the end of last season with the same coach that he has now. So I'm just going to keep him ranked where he is. But if he's in a split backfield with Alexander Mattison next week, week 2, the all-important week 2, I will have him much further down the ranks.
You guys can say you agree with each other all you want, but at the end of the day, Dwayne's got the man RB33. Freeman's got him RB25. So tighten up those gloves. Yep. We got Zamir White, gangster, going off here today. So personally, I have him RB27. Not overly feeling it myself. Haven't been drafting much of him all off season. I do think, though, he is the fairly clear running back. I would be very surprised if we see Alexander Mattison playing over 30% of the offensive snaps. But again, we'll see what happens. That's what the utilization report is for at the end of the day. today. Dwain, we're sticking with this game for your sicko start of the week. That's right. Chargers running back JK Dobbins. And as you said yesterday, yes, the man has tore his ACL, meniscus, LCL, hamstring, and Achilles since 2021. But, and this is where you go.
But he's only going to be 25 years old. And before those injuries, he was one of the most explosive backs in the NFL. Great tee up there, Hartitz. 10 plus yard attempts, 16% versus the NFL average of 10%. So a very explosive back. Missed tackles forced 20% versus 16% for the NFL average. And then average yards after contact, 3.3 versus 2.7 for the NFL average. So if he's only 70, 80% of that, I think that JK Dobbins is going to smash this season. It is a very, ambiguous situation for week one. We have no clue really how this backfield is going to split up. I've got it projected as basically 35% to Gus Edwards, 35% to JK Dobbins, and then a sprinkle in of Kamani Vidal. So we'll see how it ultimately plays out. But I do think there's a chance, Ian, that you come out, you get hot hand. Dobbins has looked really good in camp. All the reports have been glowing. He's all over social media talking about how he's back. He seems like a man on the mission. So if there is a back that I'm picking from this Chargers backfield in week one to where we could look up at the end of the day and we're like, holy crap, JK Dobbins or a player just put up 20 points, I think it's JK Dobbins. Like, that would be my pick from this group. I don't think I could really envision myself saying that about any of these other players. So Dobbins is, yes, a sicko start. If you're in a crunch and you need a player that you got to put in that running back too, or maybe one of your flex spots, I think Dobbins is a name you can consider.
Freedman in our consensus ranks. Dwain and I have J.K. Dobbins over Gus Edwards, but you, Waz, and then Paul Charchian all have Gus Bus ahead of Dobbins. So talk about how you see this backfield playing out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sign that, it's week one. Nobody knows anything. That's why I say I like week two, because at least we have some information from week one. I mean, it's still a sample size of only one, but at least we have something. Right now, we really just have guesses. And I will agree, but still slightly disagree with Dwayne's point. I say if you're looking for ceiling, J.K. Dobbins is the guy within this offense. To Dwayne's point, if one of these running backs has like a league-winning type of week, 20 points for fantasy, it is J.K. Dobbins. I would say it is likelier, though, that Gus Edwards ends up leading the backfield in carries this week. And both of those things could be true. Like, Gus Edwards could have, 12 carries. J.K. Dobbins could have 10 and still end up outscoring him. Like, that could end up being the case. But I do think we see Edwards lead the backfield. But again, it's week one. No one knows anything, especially with the Chargers in this backfield.
And more fantasy lineups than not, Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins, no, you should have someone better to start out there. But yeah, you could imagine once we find out who the guy's going to be, to Freedman's point, hopefully by as soon as week two, then maybe we can get excited about a run-first offense under Harbaugh and Greg Roman. So good stuff there, guys. Now we're going to go through some of Freedman's favorites right after a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. DraftKings, there it is. Hey everyone, with the football season kicking off, it's the perfect time to dive into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $250 in bonus bets, plus get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. That is something we can all celebrate. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. And stay in on the action and use your $250 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet on touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and that ever awesome 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. All right, guys, Freedman favorites, alliteration. Don't leave home without it. We're talking some wide receivers right here. And first of all, Devontae Adams, Freedman. I tried to get you talking about my man earlier, and, we were talking about Zamir White, so I get it. But he's making the favorite list, going up against the Chargers. Devontae Adams, maybe he's still really freaking good at football.
Yeah, he might be like my favorite of the wide receiver favorites this week. I mean, it's not like I have him ranked number 1, but I have him at number 9. That's, I think, significantly higher than some of the other rankers have him. And the thing is, basically it's just like, hey, I think he's still Davante Adams. Last year, looking at different stats, he was number 1 in the league with a 79% Whopper. For those who don't know, Whopper stands for weighted opportunity rating. And it's basically a combination of how many targets did a guy get and then how far down the field were his targets. So he got a lot of air yards and he got a lot of targets. And with that elite usage, he had 1,144 yards receiving despite playing in a terrible offense. Things I think will be a little bit better with the Raiders offense this year. I think Gardner Minshew is probably better than the situation they had last year. Looking at his season-long prop, that was 1,000.5 receiving yards. I like Adams to go over that number for the season. I like him even more this week when we look at him going against the Chargers. Dwain mentioned earlier that the Chargers defense really struggled last year. I know obviously new defensive coordinator, some new players coming in, but still a lot of the old players that they have. And we look at what Adams has done in his 4 games against the Chargers since he joined the Raiders. 54 targets, 494 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving against the division rival team. Last year, the Chargers were number 3 in largest fantasy point boost allowed to wide receivers. That's a metric that we have at FantasyLife that you can see in our DVP tool. I mean, the Chargers were basically taking good wide receivers and making them great on a points per game basis. And I think Davante Adams is already still a great wide receiver, even though he is entering his age 32 season. So yeah, for me, Davante Adams is pretty cleanly a top 10 wide receiver this week.
Dwain, I know we did enough drafts, and I can say for certainty you weren't the biggest fan of Davante Adams this offseason because I don't think we ever exactly came away with him on any of our squads. Maybe 1 or 2 out there when he fell. But looking at Gardner Minshew now under center, not the world's biggest upgrade over again what we saw out of Aiden O'Connell last year, but maybe an upgrade nevertheless. We did see Michael Pittman actually outscore Davante Adams in PPR points per game last season, even though I don't think anybody would sit here and try to tell you that Pittman is a better wide receiver than Adams. So it's a crowded offense, Dwain, but what is your sort of, level of fear and the, fate of Davante Adams throughout this offseason?
I'm not really worried about it for the season long. I think Freedman could totally be right week 1. I mean, he's fully healthy. You're going to come out, you're going to have all the wrinkles, all the things you're going to use to get Davante Adams the ball that defenses aren't going to be familiar with yet. The Chargers are still going to be, learning their new defense. So I think there's really an opportunity here to Freedman's point. I have him ranked quite a bit lower than Freedman, but it really comes back to in week 1 being more about Gardner Minshew, right? And the overall mentality of the Raiders offense, which Freedman already talked about. They're going to be willing to stick with the run, even if the game script gets a little bit sideways, because they've got that defensive-minded head coach and Antonio Pierce. He's going to stay committed to the run. So when I think you put all those things together, like I don't worry about Davante Adams, destroying my fantasy season because I passed on him. But I could totally see him out producing, what I projected him for the season. But when I look at week 1, it's like I had a hard time with him because I'm like, okay, like he's healthy, like everything could go right here, but I've got him projected for 8 targets, so that's one of the higher target projections, that I have out there for the week. The problem is I've got him at 61 yards because I don't have Gardner Minshew throwing for a lot of passing yards. And this also isn't a game, the way we run our model, it's based off of the projected total points, using the Vegas spreads. So there's not a lot of points to give away across the offense. So that's pushing Davante Adams down a bit for me. But I'm with Freeman. I think the man's going to get his targets in week 1. We'll see if he can turn that into, something significant.
That's a whole lot of stats and words, and you guys somehow didn't include the fact that Davante Adams' grandparents are getting to see him play for the first time on Sunday. So if that's not a reason for my man to go nuclear, I don't know what is. I hope, again, Grandma and Grandpa Adams have a fantastic day. And then we hope Tyler Lockett maybe has a fantastic day against the Broncos, another one of Freedman's favorite wide receivers. And again, Freedman, maybe as much as people have been writing off on Tyler Lockett, as some quarterback famously said, he has not written back just yet. Talk about Lockett in a crowded Seahawks passing attack, and let's face it, a winnable matchup.
Yeah, Lockett is dealing with a thigh injury, so maybe slight concern. Be sure to monitor that. But he said he's going to play. His coach has said he's going to play, so not too worried about that. And I expect by the end of the week we would see him practice fully. But you look at Tyler Lockett. Last season, he failed to have over 1,000 scrimmage yards or 8 yards per target for the first time in a half decade. Like, it was a pretty underwhelming season for him. He turns 32 years later this month. Like, you can see, like, he might be falling off the age cliff. Like, there's a possibility for that, but it's week 1. He should be fresh entering it. And the Seahawks offense could be more explosive this year with their new offensive coordinator and Ryan Grubb. And then you look at the matchup. Last year, the Broncos were number 32 in defensive pass DVOA against number 2 wide receivers. And I think we're going to see DK Metcalf get shadow coverage from the top cornerback, Pat Surtain. And if that happens, that means Lockett is running the majority of his routes against cornerback Riley Moss, who's a second-year special teamer turned starter who has just 21 NFL coverage snaps to his name. Like, that feels like the kind of scenario that Lockett could really exploit. And the team would be, I think, pretty incentivized not to target Pat Surtain's coverage. So I think this is a kind of one-time situation. I'm not super optimistic on Lockett for the entirety of the season, but with it being week 1, with him being fresh and going against a guy who's really never played cornerback in the NFL before, I think this is a spot to capitalize if you're looking for someone further down the board.
Lockett did not have 100 receiving yards in a game last year, but if you did watch him work out there, didn't seem like he necessarily fell off a cliff. Again, numbers weren't great, but one of the cool new stats we do have, ESPN's open score, which is meant to help quantify separation. And last year, better than Stephon Diggs, better than even Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, amongst others, tied for 17th with George Pickens overall. So, Dwain, one of your many great articles you put together this offseason was the whole wide receiver age cliff phenomenon. What did you see with Tyler Lockett's underlying numbers? And are you buying potentially him telling Father Time to F off for just another year?
I can see him telling it to F off for a week, if he's healthy, to Freedman's point, because, you have DK Metcalf, who is their leader, against man coverage. And so it would make sense. Like, if I'm the Broncos, if I'm going to lock down a player when I go to man or go to zone concepts, that, as you talk about, Ian, hey, they're man until they're not a lot of times. I could see Tyler Lockett being, a sneaky start in week 1. Again, let's make sure that thigh injury is better. But overall, I'm not really, I don't want to be in on Tyler Lockett for the season because there's just too many things. Like, we've got the age hitting. He's vastly deteriorated over the last 2 years against man coverage, which is a pretty good signal. It's not predictive as in, when this happens, you're guaranteed the wide receiver's hitting the cliff, because quarterback play, guys, does matter, right? If your quarterback can't accurately get you the ball, that's an issue. But Geno's been really good the last 2 years. I mean, we saw him out here dropping seeds in preseason as well. Geno's been a pretty accurate quarterback, so I don't think that's been the issue for Lockett. So I do think we are reaching the end here. They also have an investment in Jackson Smith and Jigba, a first-round pick last year. So I could totally see this being more of the baton handoff, Lockett becoming the third guy, DK Metcalf being the number 1, JSN being the number 2.
Geno Smith, number 1 in the NFL in completion percentage, over expected over these last 2 years. Really has a freaking awesome mixtape, again, of some of those deep downfield dimes. So hopefully that O-line can stand up. Would love to see, again, some of those vertical concepts from Grubb really get put into action with a talented wide receiver trio. Freedman, time for some tight end talks, and one specific one who could actually, unironically, lead his team in targets, resides in Buffalo. That's right, we're talking some Dawson Knox. Nah, it's Dalton Kincaid. But hey, seriously, going up against the Cardinals, it's a winnable matchup. Did have some concerning splits with Knox last year. How good are you feeling about Kincaid this week, Freedman?
Yeah, absolutely love Kincaid for the season and love him for this week. He flashed last year, 673 yards receiving, 91 targets, which doesn't seem like all that great of a season when you compare him to someone like Sam Laporta, who just absolutely tore it up as a rookie. But, just by historical standards, that was a really good rookie season for Kincaid. And then now you look at the context around him. No Stephon Diggs, no Gabe Davis. That leaves 241 targets vacated in their absence, and this opportunity for Kincaid to emerge as the number 1 pass catcher. They line him up all over the formation, in the slot, in line, out wide. That means he has the scheme versatility where they can design touches for him pretty much at any point in the game. And then you look at the matchup. The Cardinals last season were number 31 in defensive pass DVOA against tight ends. I think this is a season where Kincaid could emerge as sort of like, I don't want to say like young Travis Kelce, but like, I think we we could see Kincaid really threaten to be a top 3, a top 2 tight end. And this week, I think Kincaid could be the number 1 guy on the board.
Dwain, I know you've been grounding projections throughout the offseason, and then now in week 1, it's like, okay, no more 17-game samples. We got to go 160-minute, limited, small sample size. So Kincaid, number 1 in Buffalo, and if so, or if not, which wide receiver do you see potentially knocking him off that, again, leaderboard?
Yeah, I think Kincaid's definitely the favorite to lead this team in targets. But I would say Keon Coleman a second. I know a lot of people don't like him because they talk about the contested catch stuff. Guys, all wide receivers are made different. There are different ways you can win. It all really comes down to if Josh Allen is willing to throw to a player like that. When you have a quarterback that's willing to throw with a contested catch guy that's basically like, hey, I may not look open, but I'm open. If you get that going between those two players, it's fine. You can earn your targets. So there is some risk with Keon because we don't know that for sure with Josh Allen. We haven't really seen him play with that archetype as his wide receiver 1 because Stephon Diggs, he's a good separator. So he's a guy that's been able to get open and create that space. So we'll see what happens. But I do think that Kincaid's the favorite. I am a little nervous about the Dawson Knox stuff because he does have a decent contract. They've talked a lot about using both of their tight ends. That would be the only thing that would derail Kincaid. And what's interesting is, like in the old days of the Buffalo offense, when I say old days, like just back to the beginning of last year, when they were dropping back and throwing the ball all the time, like a 70% route participation for a tight end in that offense wouldn't have mattered. You would have been like, oh, that's like 80% on any other team. Problem is they turned into a run-first offense for the entire second half of the year under Joe Brady. If they do that and they hold Dalton Kincaid to a 70% route participation, even if he's an amazing player, which there's still questions on whether that's going to happen, there could be challenges for him meeting fantasy expectations. So I hope that none of those things happen. I hope the Bills go back to a pass-first offense. Let's throw the ball to James Cook. Let's get, Dalton Kincaid out there. I mean, you did spend a first-round pick on him last year. Let's throw the ball more. And if those things happen, I think Freedman's absolutely right. He could be a guy that's, he could challenge for the tight end 1 overall.
Cardinals ranking 31st ranked scoring defense out here. So similarly to the Washington Commanders, who ranked 32nd, wouldn't be surprised if having some healthy baller quarterbacks under center and that bad defense leads to plenty of fantasy-friendly shootouts here, especially in the early going of 2024. Another tight end you wanted to highlight, Matthew Freedman, is an old man. He's old. Look at him. Zach Ertz for the Commanders, reunited with Cliff Kingsbury, got that quarterback upgrade I mentioned in Jaden Daniels, going up against a Buccaneers defense that allowed the 3rd most DraftKings points per game to the position last year. Hey, man, we do have a second-round tight end in there, but Freeman, this would not be the first time that we saw Kingsbury lean on Ertz, even though they maybe have a better option behind him.
Yeah, it's not like in the year of our Lord 2024, I want to talk about Zach Ertz, but I mean, the guy is going to get some opportunities. And with the recent departure of wide receiver Jahan Dotson, Ertz, I think, has a real shot to be the number 2 pass catchers for the Commanders, especially, as you mentioned, since he's familiar with that offense with Cliff Kingsbury from their time together with the Cardinals. He's 34 years old later this season. I mean, he's fragile. He's a catch and fall specialist at this point, but it is week 1. He should be moderately healthy. And I think that gives him a chance to be pretty productive in this matchup. And we did see that he was moderately productive in his 1 full season with Cliff Kingsbury in 2022. And then the matchup, the Buccaneers last year were number 2 in most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So you put it all together, and Zach Ertz, if you're a little bit desperate at the position, I think Ertz could be like a low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 this week.
Funny enough, Zach Ertz over these past 2 seasons has 74 receptions. Kyle Pitts, 81. And yes, they both were missing plenty of time out there. So, Dwain, I know Ertz was someone that we kind of talked about as a late round pick, 19th, 20th round, especially on some of those DraftKings streams we were doing. Now it seems like the time we're trusting him. And I'll tell you what, man, as a gambling man, taking that over on whatever his reception prop is, I've heard of worse ideas.
Yeah, Zach Ertz is the sicko start at tight end, in the rankings article. So Freedman and I are completely aligned on this. And even if you go back to last year before Trey McBride took over the starting role in Arizona, over those first 5 games, Zach Ertz had a 24% targets per route run. Guys, that's tight end 1 worthy. If you go back and you look at the history of tight ends, they've been guys that can earn targets at that rate. And when I went back and I dug in even deeper, Ian, those are guys that have finished in the top 6. So I'm not saying Zach Ertz is going to keep that role all season. I do think that Ben Sinnott will eventually take away some of that work. But early in the year, I agree with Freedman, and Zach Ertz is a very sneaky start in week 1.
Now it's time for everyone's game. Start, sit, drop, aka 1, 2, 3. Please, for the love of God, do not drop these players, even though we will be letting those, words leave our mouths here in just a second. So, Dwain, starting off with some running backs, we got Jerome Ford versus the Cowboys, Chuba Hubbard versus Saints, and Devin Singletary versus the Vikings. Start, sit, drop, Mr. McFarland. Go.
I'm starting Singletary because I think that like week 1, he's locked into a huge workload. So I'll just take the volume. Ford, I still think there's a chance that they're going to split those carries up, so I'm going to put him on the bench. And then I'm going to cut Hubbard, mainly because I think once Jonathan Brooks is back, now I'm thinking more long-term, he is going to take over. Obviously, Nick Chubb will eventually return to the lineup for the Browns, but they could still, kind of hold him back a little bit. They may not give him his full workload. So I think there could be a longer period of time where it could be tougher for Chubb. Yes, they're both coming off of knee injuries. Yes, Chubb's happened earlier in the year than Jonathan Brooks, but his was much more complicated, and he's an older player. So the younger guys typically are going to be able to heal quicker. So that would be my order. Singletary, Ford, and then Chuba Hubbard.
Freedman, do you concur?
I agree with Hubbard. He's the guy that I would drop. I would start Ford just because we've seen him do it. I'm a little bit pessimistic about what we saw out of the Giants offense last year and what we might see out of them this year. So I'm probably benching Singletary, but totally agree on Hubbard.
I'm siding with Dwain over here. I do have Singletary over Ford, but yeah, they are pretty close. All right, guys, wide receiver edition. Start, sit, drop. DJ Moore versus the Titans, Terry McLaurin versus the Buccaneers, and Deontay Johnson against the Saints. Dwain, get after it.
DJ Moore is just the best player of the group, so I'm starting him. Terry McLaurin's going to the bench. I do think he has a great matchup this week, so I'm not saying he can't be in lineups. He could totally go off as the wide receiver 1 for the Commanders. And then I'm going to I don't even want to say these words. Ian, why are you making me say these words? I'm going to drop Deontay Johnson because I would never drop Deontay Johnson, but this is the sick game that you make us play.
I cannot believe Dwayne's dropping Deontay Johnson. Freeman, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Real Sophie's choice with these players that you've given us. But Deontay Johnson is the guy I'm dropping, starting DJ Moore no matter what. So I guess Terry McLaurin goes to the bench.
Terry McLaurin facing a Buccaneers secondary, starting 2 cornerbacks who have not played an NFL snap. I know everyone's getting hyped up about the Mike Evans potential boom game. Maybe look on the other side of the field as well. T-Mac might be on his way. Start, sit, drop, quarterback edition. Dwain, Caleb Williams versus the Titans, Jaden Daniels versus the Buccaneers, and Jordan Love against the Eagles.
I'm starting Jaden Daniels. He's my QB8 this week. We've been talking about it all offseason, and now you do week 1 projections, and you see why rushing is so important. Right away, you've got this immediate floor. If he performs as a passer, he could be a top 3 guy this week, but I think he's a lock to be inside your top 10. I've got him ranked ahead of Joe Burrow, so I'm obviously going with Jaden Daniels. I'm going to put Jordan Love on the bench, although there's a lot of points that could be scored in this game. The Eagles made a lot of improvements to their secondary. I think they could be a sneaky rebound candidate to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to have to cut Caleb Williams. I don't want to. I really like all 3 wide receivers, but I have to cut him. I do think the Titans, I went back after our show yesterday and I studied all the Titans offseason moves on defenses again. They might be one of the more improved defenses. So you add Awuzie to your cornerback room. You also go out and you add Snead from the Chiefs. I mean, so like they've definitely invested in their secondary. So I could see it being a situation. It's your first start as a quarterback. You're not going to get as much rushing upside as we would get from Jaden Daniels. So yes, he hits the bench.
I have to
cut Caleb Williams. See, this game is I hate this game.
I concur, as does Freedman, per his ranks, if they are to be believed. But Freedman, let's round things out with our tight ends. Brock Bowers at the Chargers, David Njoku versus the Cowboys, and Dallas Goedert versus the Packers. Start, sit, drop. Freedman, go.
Really, I'm kind of disinterested in all of these guys, to be honest. But I guess I will start David Njoku. I will probably bench Brock Bowers, and I'm going to cut Dallas Goedert. I think it will be hard for him to get the targets that he needs to be productive in that offense, in Philadelphia. So yeah, cutting Goedert, starting Njoku, benching Bowers.
I actually have that almost the opposite, Dwain. I'm starting Goddard, sitting in the Njoku, and I'm dropping Bowers. So I think we could be seeing a bit more Michael Mayer, at least early on, than we would hope for. Your thoughts, Dwain?
I have it as Freedman. Like Bauer still has the talent profile that I'm not dropping him no matter what, because there is just a chance like he absolutely explodes. He's one of the rarest freak tight ends we've ever seen, so I'm not cutting him. I agree with your thought process though, Ian. I could see this one going either way, but I do agree with Freedman. I am going to start David Njoku this week. I am going to bench Brock Bowers, and I am going to cut Dallas Goedert.
That is a freaking shame. But you know what? That's life in the big city. Sometimes when you got to make tough fantasy football decisions, which we'll continue to help you guys with each and every day over here on the Fantasy Life Show, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. Don't leave home without it. You can, you can listen to us wherever. Actually, that's a fact. So make sure you check us out again tomorrow. Dwayne and I will be right back here going through all the fantasy relevant injuries. And otherwise, guys, enjoy some freaking football. We're back and couldn't be more excited about it. So for Freedman, for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.